There are moments in sports that go beyond the box score. Moments where the game itself becomes secondary to something more fundamental: respect, protection, and the unspoken rules of what it means to have someone's back when the league that's supposed to protect you looks the other way. May 22nd was one of those nights. Caitlyn Clark walked onto that court with a bad back, got clawed and scratched by a defender running a deliberate campaign of physical intimidation from the opening tip, hit a logo 3 from 33 feet to punctuate her response, and still dropped 22 points and 9 assists while leading the Indiana Fever to a 90-82 victory over the Golden State Valkyries, a team that hadn't surrendered 90 points to anyone all season long. But the real story of that night wasn't just what Clark did. It was what Maisha Hines Allen did, and what Tiffany Hayes did afterward, and what the WNBA chose to do about all of it, which was absolutely nothing. Let's break down everything that happened, because this story deserves the full treatment. The Golden State Valkyries didn't stumble into physicality that night. They arrived with a deliberate game plan, and Tiffany Hayes was the centerpiece of it. From the opening possession, Hayes was attached to Clark with the specific intention of making every single movement uncomfortable, costly, and borderline dangerous. We're not talking about hard-nosed defense. We're not talking about the kind of physical play that earns respect in a league built on toughness. We're talking about something different entirely. By the time the first quarter ended, Clark's arms were already marked up. Scratches running across her skin that didn't come from hitting the floor or fighting through a screen. Those scratches came from fingernails, Hayes' fingernails, dragged deliberately across Clark's arms every time she tried to catch a pass, every time she cut toward the basket, every time she set up on the perimeter and tried to do her job. Think about what that actually means. You're trying to run an offense. You're managing a back injury that's been following you through this stretch of the season. And every time you reach out to receive a ball, someone is physically scratching you, not bumping you, not boxing you out, scratching you, like a street fight dressed up in basketball uniforms. Hayes didn't just defend Clark. She grabbed her, bumped her, used her body in ways that only draw whistles when a referee happens to be standing directly beside the play. And even then, the calls came inconsistently all night, which created this completely lopsided situation where Hayes was getting physical on both ends of the floor, drawing contact one way and getting away with it going the other direction entirely. It was a carefully engineered imbalance, and the officials let most of it slide. Clark's response to all of it: she kept running the offense, never stopped, never stood in front of a referee demanding justice after every play. She absorbed the contact, absorbed the scratches, and kept operating. That's a level of mental composure that deserves more recognition than it typically receives, because most players, regardless of position or experience level, would have lost their composure somewhere in that first half. Hayes made her presence known early in ways that went beyond the physical. She was in Clark's face after buckets on her. She was lobbying officials after plays went against her. She was sending a clear message that she wasn't there to quietly do a job. She was there to get inside Clark's head, rattle her rhythm, and make the entire game feel personal. And for a while, Hayes was scoring on Clark too. Let's be accurate about that. Hayes put together some legitimate buckets in this game, but the way those buckets happened matters. It wasn't Hayes winning skill battles or maneuvering Clark with footwork and positioning. Hayes was using her size and her body to bully space, leaning into Clark, pushing off in ways that should have drawn whistles going the other direction. So while the officials were swallowing calls against Hayes' defense, they were letting Hayes use her body offensively in ways that weren't clean either. Clark was getting squeezed from both directions. Then came the bucket that changed the entire temperature of the game. Third quarter. Clark brings the ball up the floor, reads the defense, and pulls up from 33 feet. Not a corner 3 with daylight, not a catch and shoot from a beautiful ball screen, a logo 3 from well behind half court with Hayes in her face, a defender who had been physically assaulting her arms for 2.5 quarters. It went straight through. What Clark did next was completely intentional and completely earned. She turned and got in Hayes' face, because at that point it wasn't just basketball anymore. Both of them understood what this game had become, and Clark made sure Hayes understood she wasn't going to be worn down, rattled, scratched into submission, or outcompeted. The logo 3 was an answer. The confrontation that followed it was the punctuation mark. Hayes didn't back down. She got into Clark's space. The whole thing escalated fast, 2 players standing their ground on the court with the game's entire emotional weight behind them. And that's when Maisha Hines Allen moved. She didn't wait for a whistle. She didn't wait for a timeout or for a coach to signal her or for a referee to get between the players. Hines Allen saw what was happening and she moved. And the way she moved matters more than the fact that she moved. She wasn't walking. She wasn't jogging over diplomatically with her hands up trying to calm everyone down and keep the peace. She was sprinting directly into the space between Clark and Hayes, with body language that communicated one single thing to everyone on that court. This is where it ends, and if you want to keep going, you're going to have to come through me first. She looked like someone drawing a hard line and daring Hayes to cross it. This wasn't Hines Allen's only intervention in that game either. Earlier, right before halftime, Clark and Janelle Salon were jawing at each other. Both players heated, a double technical already called, and the situation had the potential to escalate into something that could have cost Indiana real momentum or gotten Clark ejected at the worst possible time. Hines Allen wasn't even on the floor when it started. She sprinted in from the bench, got her hands on Clark, and physically pulled her away before things could go further. That's two separate moments in the same game where Hines Allen stepped between Clark and a potentially damaging situation. Not because someone asked her to, not because it was the safe, diplomatic play, because she came into this game with a specific understanding of her role, and she executed that role without hesitation. After the game, Hines Allen broke her silence and said exactly what she was thinking without dressing it up or softening it. She said she needs to protect the MVP and the best player to ever play the game. And she said it like she was stating something obvious, because to her, it is. She acknowledged she knows exactly why Indiana signed her and what they brought her there to do, and she made clear she has every intention of continuing to do it. That kind of clarity is rare. And Indiana fans who have spent 2 seasons watching Clark get targeted, roughed up, scratched, shoved, and fouled without consequence, and without protection from her own teammates, finally had something concrete to point to. A player who doesn't just say she has Clark's back, but physically puts her body between Clark and anyone trying to make the game dangerous. Indiana didn't pick up Hines Allen because the roster needed depth at the forward position. They signed her because they watched the 2024 and 2025 seasons unfold and made a deliberate decision that the next time someone tried to target Clark the way she's been targeted, there would be real and immediate consequences on the floor. That's a fundamentally different kind of roster construction than what Indiana has operated with in previous seasons. And understanding why Hines Allen was the right choice requires understanding who she actually is as a player and a competitor. She won a championship with the Washington Mystics in 2019. She's earned all WNBA recognition over a career built entirely in spaces where officials let physicality go and players learn quickly that you either bring that energy yourself or you get overwhelmed by someone else's. The paint in a professional basketball game is not a gentle place. Hines Allen has spent her entire career operating there, which means she has spent her entire career in exactly the environment where the most physical, most uncalled contact happens. Her game was never constructed around finesse. She scores when the team needs her to. She can run the floor in transition. But what she is genuinely elite at is making the area around the basket feel inhospitable to anyone who didn't come prepared to deal with a player who is not moving, not apologizing, and not backing down from anything. Her history also includes a significant confrontation with Sophie Cunningham, who is now her teammate on the Indiana Fever. 2 players who have been on opposite sides of heated moments on the court are now standing together on the same side of the floor. And Indiana specifically orchestrated that. They went and found players who don't flinch and pointed them all in the same direction. That's not coincidence. That's a front office operating with a very clear vision of what this team needs to become. The dynamic between Hines Allen and Cunningham carries real weight. Cunningham said publicly that she's glad Hines Allen is on her team now rather than playing against her. Hines Allen returned that sentiment without hesitation, saying the feeling is completely mutual. 2 players who understand exactly what physical, edge-of-the-rules basketball looks like are now sitting on the same bench, watching the same game, and protecting the same teammate. The roster Indiana put together around Clark this season finally makes sense as a complete unit rather than one extraordinary player surrounded by supporting cast members. Aaliyah Boston is a problem in the paint under any circumstances, but what she did against the Valkyries, 20 points and 16 rebounds against the best defense in the league, a defense that had not surrendered 90 points to anyone all season, is the kind of performance that shifts how opponents have to approach their defensive preparation. You can't just send bodies at Clark all night if Boston is eating your paint defenders alive. Something has to give, and Golden State found out exactly what that looks like when Indiana runs on all cylinders. Kelsey Mitchell contributes on both ends and brings the kind of consistent two-way presence that winning teams need from their wings. Cunningham comes off the bench and delivers energy, physicality, and shooting that flips the momentum of games at exactly the moments when Indiana needs it. And Hines Allen provides the specific kind of physical deterrent that makes every opposing coach think twice before drawing up a play that requires getting dirty in Clark's vicinity. Clark benefits from all of it in ways that compound. Teams can't just isolate her and send one physical defender to wear her down all night when Boston is dominating the glass, when Mitchell is making plays on the perimeter, when Cunningham is ready to match anyone's physicality, and when Hines Allen is standing 15 feet away watching every single possession with the body language of someone who has a long memory and no interest in backing down. The Valkyries knew about Clark's back injury coming into May 22nd. They came in with an aggressive game plan specifically because they believed they could rattle her. They thought the combination of a physical defender, inconsistent officiating, and a compromised Clark would be enough to get a result. And Indiana's answer to that thinking, built over an offseason of deliberate roster construction, was to put players on the floor who make that entire calculus feel dangerous rather than safe. Indiana won 90-82. Clark finished with 22 and 9. Boston put up 20 and 16. The Valkyries went home on the wrong side of a result that exposed real limitations against a team playing with genuine cohesion and edge. Tiffany Hayes did not handle any of that gracefully. Before she even got to the press conference, she was caught on a hot microphone, and what came out of her mouth was stunning in its audacity. Hayes told reporters that officials are never going to start calling the fouls on Clark. And then she went further, claiming that if they did, Clark would never get to play the game. This from a player who spent an entire game dragging her nails across Clark's skin. The complaint walking off the court was that Clark gets too many foul calls, despite Clark finishing with 5 personal fouls, including a technical and a flagrant one. The officiating clearly wasn't handing Clark any gifts that night. Hayes said it anyway because the narrative was more important to her than what actually happened on the floor. But the press conference wasn't even the worst of it. After the game on social media, a fan posted about sending people after Clark. The language was explicit and unmistakable, talking about cousins who would ride at dawn on request. This wasn't hyperbolic sports trash talk. Clark has a documented history with stalkers. The threat of coordinated physical harm directed at a specific athlete is not a metaphor. It's a threat. Tiffany Hayes replied to that post with a laughing emoji and the words, "That's real." That's not competitive fire. That's not professional frustration from a player who lost a tough game. That's a professional athlete publicly validating a post describing organized violence against another professional athlete who has documented experiences with people targeting her outside of basketball. The reaction was immediate and it was loud. Fans, journalists, and people who don't even follow the fever closely began calling for the league to respond with real consequences. Not a fine, a suspension, because what Hayes did online would get most people fired from a regular job without a second conversation about whether the termination was warranted. The WNBA has a no space for hate policy. The league repeats it publicly and often. It's part of the league's identity and its stated commitment to all its players. Last year, when Angel Reese made accusations against Indiana Fever fans regarding racist behavior during a game against the Chicago Sky, the league launched a full formal investigation. They committed resources to it. They made sure everyone understood they were taking it seriously. The investigation received real attention, and the league's response was visible and substantive. When Tiffany Hayes laughed along with a post describing coordinated physical harm against Caitlyn Clark, a player with a documented history of being stalked, the WNBA produced complete silence. No statement, no announced fine, no investigation, nothing came out of the league office at all. These two responses cannot both reflect the same set of values. You cannot have a no space for hate policy that applies in full to one player's situation and produces total silence in another player's situation. That's not inconsistency. That's selective enforcement. And everyone watching already understands exactly what that selection looks like. Indiana recognized that the league wasn't going to protect Clark, so Indiana protected Clark themselves. They built a roster with the physical presence and the competitive mentality to make targeting Clark an uncomfortable and costly choice for anyone willing to try it. And on May 22nd, that roster did exactly what it was designed to do while the league office said nothing. These two teams are scheduled to meet again at Chase Center in San Francisco on May 28th. The rematch is coming fast. The Valkyries are going to want revenge. They know what Indiana brought to the floor in the last meeting. They know about Hines Allen. They know Clark is still producing MVP caliber numbers while managing a back injury. And they now know that the Fever are not going to stand quietly while their best player gets scratched up all night. Analysts have already started placing Clark in serious MVP conversations based on her numbers this season. The Fever's championship ceiling with this roster healthy and operating with this kind of edge is higher than it's been at any point since Clark arrived in Indiana. The Hayes situation doesn't disappear because Indiana got the win. The WNBA's selective enforcement doesn't become acceptable because the Fever played well enough to overcome everything Golden State threw at them. These things deserve continued attention, because a policy that covers every player or covers none of them is either real or it isn't. There's a difference between a teammate who tells you she has your back and a teammate who sprints across the court the moment you need her there. Maisha Hines Allen is the second kind. She proved it twice in the same game. She proved it with her body, with her positioning, with her body language, and with her words afterward, delivered without political softening, without careful hedging, just the plain truth of what she came to Indiana to do. Caitlyn Clark walked into that building with a bad back, spent the entire game getting scratched by a player running a deliberate campaign of physical intimidation, hit a logo 3 from 33 feet over that same player's outstretched hand, and led her team to 90 points against the best defense in the league. And when things got dangerous, she didn't have to face it alone. Indiana sent a message on May 22nd that the WNBA refused to send. The next time someone decides that targeting Clark is worth the risk, they're going to find out quickly and clearly that the cost of that decision just got a lot higher than it used to be. Maisha Hines Allen made sure of that, and Indiana Fever fans have every reason to be grateful she did. Like and subscribe and turn on all notifications so you never miss out. Drop some love for Maisha in the comments below. She earned every word of it.